Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor, and with me in the lair, I once again have an esteemed guest who I would like to ask for an introduction. So, esteemed guest, introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael Roberti. I wrote a book called The Traitors We Are. It's set in a world where writing disappears when the one who wrote it dies. I'm also a high school teacher in North Carolina in the United States, and I formerly was the singer of a punk band. And I like to mention that because it kind of, I think, informs the tone of my work a little bit.
Okay, good to know. Well, given punk has a certain reputation in general, and it seems like that is a reputation that you somewhat maybe not reputation per se, but influence that you still carry. I want to know: is there anything you don't want to talk about or do not want mentioned or alluded to over the course of this interview?
I might be careful with a few of the spoilers for the book. It gets a little bit twisty. Not all of it is, super secret, and I mean, some of it is, pretty heavily foreshadowed. But I'm pretty much an open book.
Okay, interesting. You're the first person who I've asked this question who took it in that direction.
Hmm.
Okay. When you say it's got a lot of twists, so I'm assuming that there are two things. I'm assuming either there are lots of plot twists, or you have some kind of more crazy sci-fi fantasy plot going that involves a little bit of time manipulation.
Interesting. So there is a little bit of flashbacks, not necessarily time manipulation, but it's kind of one of those stories where and I've always I grew up liking stories like this where the story seems on its surface to be about one thing, and then you hit maybe a third or halfway through the book, and then you find out some key detail from the past that really says, oh wait, this is not what I thought this was about. This is about something else entirely. And it's a little bit like that. I had a one reviewer say that they thought that it was going to be a war book, primarily like military fantasy, and that's really maybe a third of it. And then it becomes more about relationships and trying to find power, trying to live a life that basically gives you what you want, but it always comes into conflict with what other people want. So sometimes we have goals that are mutually exclusive with other people's goals.
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. That's kind of similar to my debut actually, because it is half military fantasy, half slice of life.
Oh,
and I
interesting.
and I think a lot of people were expecting more, the military aspects to come a little bit more to the forefront, or at least that's what some of the reception seemed to be. But you know, that might just be my impression. Whether or not it's
Hmm.
actually true is debatable. Okay, next up. Is this the first book you've written?
So it's the first one I published. I wrote a book maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and I ended up shelving it. Not because I tried to put it out, but I got to the end of it and didn't really like it. I didn't think it was worth revising it. It was more of a process thing for me. Um, but I plan on, and I've been working on it very slowly as I work on the sequel for The Traders We Are, but I'm working on a retelling of it where I changed some of the key details. Specifically, the main character went from being maybe a young man in his 20s to a teenage girl. And the location, it's still set in my same fantasy world, but it's the location's different, and maybe even the time frame's a little bit different.
Okay, I see. Did you write any other kind of fiction before going to long form? So something like short stories or novellas or something like that.
I did poetry for a while. I had a poem published on a website at one point. I still do poetry on occasion, more like musings or lyrics. Similar to like what I would have done when I was in a band. I do short stories on occasion. I have not had anything put out that's been in anything. I do have two short stories up on my website, which is michaelroberti.com, and those are both very recent. Those are actually after I wrote The Traders We Are. But again, I'm kind of playing on everything's connected in this world. It again may not be the same exact time frame, but it gives a lot of insight into the different cultures and the different things that are happening elsewhere. The Traders We Are is in one location, and it's a very big world.
Okay. Next question. What inspired you to write The Traitors We Are?
Um, about there's a couple of things. So like this is kind of one of those stories that I had in my head for many years. A lot of times with the ideas I have for writing, um, specifically with the fantasy, I'll be playing like Dungeons and Dragons or another tabletop game, and I'll kind of come up with an idea. And I was thinking about an artifact I wanted to introduce, and I was thinking about the circumstances that caused that artifact to be significant. And I'm not really ready to talk about what that is yet because that will be probably revealed at the end of the book I'm writing now, which is going to be called A Grave for Us All. But basically, I had this idea of a couple of the characters and this item, and um, sort of had this whole thing done. And then I had a couple other events that were kind of tied closely around that. There was the rebellion. There was another rebellion from a different part of the same kingdom. There was a very major battle, which will be in book 3. And I kind of brought those all together. And then the main thing that kind of put it all together for me was when I had the idea that what if in this world the key feature of it is that if somebody dies, everything that they've ever written disappears at their moment of death. And I think that added a new dimension to it. I think that that made it a little bit more, gave it a little bit more intrigue, gave it a little bit more gravity for caring about a person living, because maybe they wrote a letter to somebody, and that letter, when the other person receives, it's blank. And that actually happens in chapter 3, where one of the main characters, Marilee Oberlin, receives a letter, and she has to make an assumption about who sent it to her and why. And I mean, this is a slight spoiler, but she makes the wrong assumption.
Oh yeah, I can, I can imagine what kind of things that would unleash upon her.
Mm.
Okay, next up. Uh, how d so y- to some extent you've already answered this one actually. What does it look like? What does it look like when you flesh out your world or when you develop your characters? What drives you to do that?
Probably a little bit of obsession and my ADHD disorder. But my mind floats a lot. I like to think what if questions. Sometimes I get bored. Right now I've been taking 2-hour drives to do a class. I'm going to become a driver's ed instructor on top of teaching, and I'll just kind of be sitting there and I'll think, well, what about this? What is this country like in my world? Or what how would this character feel if this happened? Or what does this character really want? I think it was, and I get a lot of writing advice from non-fantasy writers, because I guess because I'm an English teacher. But Kurt Vonnegut Jr. I think said that every character should want something, even if it's just a glass of water. And I took that to heart. Everybody needs something that they're trying to do or trying to get, and I think that that kind of gives it a lot more power than if a character's just there because they're interesting or they're cool. But what drives them forward, and what makes them part, what keeps them coming back into this plot, what makes it so that they don't just leave.
Okay, good to know. Uh, do you have any? Does the Traders We Are have anything resembling deleted scenes?
Oh yeah, yeah. There, it originally I was planning on it being a very long first book and actually a standalone. But the circumstances of how I decided to publish it kind of prevented that. I was actually going to go traditional. I only sent out about 12 queries. I actually got some good feedback. Mostly it was that everybody, I think, who queries gets it, where it's oh, this is good, but it doesn't fit my portfolio, or I like it but I'm not really interested in X genre right now, or I don't feel that spark. And that so I cut my original plan was to write about maybe a 200,000 word book, somewhere in like the 600-700 page category, and it ended up being about 360, 370. But I think that helped a lot because it made the story greater. So um for those of you guys who don't want to want to be unspoiled completely in this book, one of the key facets of this book was going to be that Marilee Oberlin and Emil Trestensen were going to get married, but I was going to have that happen very early on and have it under different circumstances. and upon their first meeting, there's kind of a chemistry there that I didn't expect. So I decided to keep it going a little bit longer to try to add more to it. Originally some of the other characters were supposed to be one off. Eric Temin in chapter 4, he's in chapter 2 and chapter 4. At first, he was supposed to die in chapter 4. But the back and forth between him and Emil Trestensen was such that I was like, I need to put these guys on the book on the page more often, and I decided to kill somebody else. So I don't think I don't think I directly like deleted any major plot point, but I did go a couple different directions based on character chemistry. Sometimes
Yeah.
they interact and you just don't really realize how it's gonna be.
Okay, so it would be more accurate to say you did a rewrite.
Yeah, that probably be more accurate. The stuff that probably is going to end up getting deleted is a great for us all because it's a little bit more unwieldy. Like Traders was very, I knew my point A and I knew my point B. A great for us all. I know my point B, but my point A and up into that is a lot more murky because there's a lot more moving parts than I thought there was going to be when I originally envisioned this.
Okay. That kind of in a sense also answers the second question I've had, I think, namely if there was
Mm.
anything you initially opposed including but then decided that it actually fits.
Oh, okay.
If you
Uh,
maybe if you want to
yeah.
add something about that or
Yeah, I get you. So, one of the so initially I was gonna make it so that there was not any romance subplots because I'm not particularly interested in that, but a couple of characters did really well together. And it was literally just the decision of who sits next to this person at this feast, and I was like, well, that would be kind of funny if these two people sat together because they're complete opposites. But again, when I wrote the scene, I was like, how would this person respond to this? How would that person respond to this? And it actually was really cute. Like it ended up being a very nice moment in a book called The Traitors We Are. And that was something I was not expecting to have. And it's going to make the next book a little bit more complicated. But I think it will ultimately be better because of that.
okay, I see. Um, I'm sorry, but I you said something a few minutes ago and somehow my stickler brain couldn't ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
You said ADHD disorder. The
Yeah.
second D already stands for disorder. You don't need
Oh,
to.
you're right. Yeah, I did not think about that. But yeah, well, so back when I was diagnosed with it in the '90s, it was actually called ADD,
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh, that's not a real thing because I didn't really have the hyperactivity. But I don't know. I don't really usually broadcast out there, but with ADHD, like the thing that I tend to do isn't necessarily be hyper, but I will, ultra fixate on things. Inattentive is a new thing, but yeah, I also am not really great with being detail oriented. That's definitely not my strong suit. So I'm working on that.
Yeah, happens. Uh, Next up, this question could technically be two questions, but I think it'd be it'd be a little more redundant if it were. So I just set it as one. Namely,
Okay.
when it comes to your writing process, is there anything you very much like, and is there anything you very much uh, dislike?
Mm,
So, do you have a favorite and least favorite aspect of writing?
I I get you. I think my favorite aspect of writing is where I can pick it up when I want to pick it up and then put it down when I feel comfortable with it. Usually, if I can listen to music while I'm doing so to get the vibe right. I listened to some very specific albums on very specific chapters of this book. So talking about punk, one of the big ones for me on this one was "And Out Comes the Wolves" by Rancid. They have some political songs a little bit. They talk a lot about being kind of on the outside looking in, which I think is central to some of the struggles in this book. Um, I listened to the new Turnstile album, Glow On, and that was good in those kind of more dream-like sequences. There's a few sequences that deal with prophecy or dreams, and when I can get into that vibe, it kind of makes it so it's easy, and the words just come out of my brain straight on to either the computer or sometimes even just my phone. My least favorite thing, I think, is where I put pressure on myself, and I tend to do that with a lot of aspects of my life, whether it's professionally, personally, or with writing. Is that I'll think this is not what I want it to be, or this is not good enough, or nobody's going to want to read this. And you have to kind of silence that self-doubt if you want to be any type of artist,
Yeah.
or author. You got to, you've got to find that confidence even if you don't really have it.
Yeah. Interesting that you took this in the direction of the writing process, because the question is mostly aimed at writing
Oh.
elements. So stuff
Oh,
like, I don't
okay.
know, dialogue, character description.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, okay, sorry. Let me go back on that. Probably description. I tend to do a lot of dialogue, I like action, but describing a room is there's one room in the book that I had to rewrite 4 times, and I just like how do I describe what I'm seeing in my head?
Yeah. Uh, I can relate to that. Okay. Next up, I think we already talked about it a little bit about publishing. So
Mhm.
if you could give me a little rundown on what the publishing process was like for you.
Okay. Well, originally I was going to self-publish or look for an indie press. When I first started writing it, I was not really that interested in going for traditional. Um, and primarily because, I've known some traditionally represented authors, who have their agents who have not sold books yet, which, is no fault of their own. It's hard out there. It's very hard to get a book deal. But, as I was writing, I started thinking, well, this is pretty good. I think somebody will want to publish this, so I'll just dip my toes. And originally, I was going to give myself a year to query before I decided to self-publish. And I really hated querying. It was okay looking up the agents, and I talked to some cool agents. I did PitMat on Twitter, and I got an agent and she read my first 3 chapters, but she said she had a full fantasy docket, and she's really being picky on fantasy right now. And especially like reading the first few chapters, people would say that oh, I think this is high fantasy. I kind of chafe under that label because when I think high fantasy, I think a lot of magic and a lot of maybe elves or dwarves. But for me, everybody in my book is human, or at least very much close to being human. And then there's a little bit of magic, but the primary magic is just the words disappearing. But I mean, we had a good conversation, and she was very, very kind. And around February of this year, I was just like, I've only sent out 12 queries. Originally, I was going to supposed to, send out, a bunch after I heard back. But like every time I thought about sitting down and querying, it took my joy away from writing, and it took my joy away from what I was doing. And I was like, well, if I don't enjoy this, then why am I doing it? If this is something that I hate, I don't need to be doing it. So I just, unfortunately, I'm kind of impulsive. It may go back to the ADHD. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna publish this. And I kind of came up with a quick cover, and it went pretty well for the first few months. It's still going pretty good. I got a new cover recently, and I think that's going to help things. But I have really no regrets. I kind of wish I had maybe researched a little bit more and thought things through. But I met some really cool people this way, and I've had some people say that they really liked what I wrote, and that meant a lot to me. So I can't really say I have regrets with it, but next time I think I would do it a little bit different.
Okay, noted. Again, I can't help but notice some similarities to how my process was like. But in my case, it wasn't really a matter of impulsivity. It was more a matter of I wanted to publish by the time I was 30, and I noticed that traditional publishing was making that seem a little unlikely. So and I
Yeah.
went and I went indie instead. Uh, did you go into this? Did you go into the publishing process with any kind of with any kind of preconceptions? And if you did, were any of them proven true?
That's a good question. I think some of them were proven true. Some of them were false. You know, um, I think that there are, like any profession, there are really good agents and really kind of not as great agents. And nobody was particularly rude to me, but I did see on when I was looking at manuscript wish lists that some of them seem to have this like, oh, don't bother commenting me, or contacting me rather, if your manuscript is like this, or I only want this. And it was just like some of it, there's a little bit of hostility, like just in the wording. But on the other end, I was expecting that, and there were some really really good agents, and I've had some good conversations. I also thought that maybe, I think everybody feels this way, is that somehow indie and self pub is lesser than trad pub, but I mean there are some really talented individuals out there, and I've been talking to a lot of these folks, and some of their ideas are just I can see why maybe traditional publishing was like, oh, I don't know if I want to take this risk, but there's people out there taking really good risks with their work and just making it happen, and being their own best advocate. And I think that maybe we might see a sea change in that, because like it just seems like more and more people are saying like this is the worst time to query, and so many agents are leaving the profession after either not being told that they can't get promoted, or they're having trouble selling books, or people want the same thing that they've read for the last 50 years. And I think that I don't really know what I expected, but was not 100% what I ended up experiencing.
Yeah. I can't help but I can't help but remember something I've heard in I think another interview like this,
Okay.
namely where someone said that unless you are a big name offer, you still have to do your own advertising, which I thought was, well, screw you too.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. That's what made me do the final decision. And it was like maybe I'm giving up a advance on like a monetary advance, but I retain the rights to my own work, and I can do what I want with it. And like I wasn't against changing certain elements of it, but I do know the story I wanted to tell. And like I'm 35. I got two children. I'm a teacher. I don't really have time to be waiting years and years to publish this. I want to do it now. I think it's the right story at the right time. So I think there's a lot of power in that.
Okay. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the book isn't out yet, right?
Is what?
It's not out yet. It's gonna come out a little later.
No, it came out in February. So the
Oh,
the sequel is coming out next year.
okay. That means it's been a while since you've had some time to gauge the its reception.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do an ARC release, or did you send out like advanced reading copies or something like that?
That's something I would have done if I could do it again, but I mainly just pushed self-publish, or publish on KDP, and just let things sort it out. I think that would have been good, and I think that maybe having some sort of run up to it would have been better. But it hasn't done badly. Like I've seen some people have months where they sell no books, or only a few books, and I mean my book isn't always selling great, but it has ups and downs like anybody's book. And I think that doing advanced reader copies would have helped. Especially with my early days, my first trouble was getting any reviews, but I think that happens kind of exponentially as you get one review, and then a little bit later you get another one, and then eventually you're in the double digits. But yeah, that was something that I messed up on. Was I should have done some sort of anticipatory, either advanced reader copies, or maybe some sort of promotional campaign where I did like a video, or cover reveal or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I can again another thing I can relate somewhat from personal experience, somewhat from what other people have said. Uh, uh, I kind of want to ask if the reception taught you anything, but you kind of already mentioned that.
Mm.
So next up, uh, how many of the people you would call close know that you know of your writing endeavors, and how did they deal with that?
I my family knew, and people that I talked to on social media knew, and a few of them. So I mean, I guess like that would be sort of like advanced read copies. Is a few people read it before it was out and said that they really liked it. And that gave me a little bit more confidence. The school I teach at, I mean, I mentioned it to my students. Like, I have ethical problems with out and out promoting it to my students and telling them, hey, go buy this. But I said, hey guys, I'm working on this. Just to show them that there are still people working on books, and they'd ask me some questions about it. But one of my coworkers found out about it and then bought it and then showed it to everybody in the school, and then a few of them bought it. So I actually got quite a few sales from my school, and they've been very supportive. They've wanted me to like sign the book, and they're just talk to me about it, and it's been really. I mean, that was really nice. I mean, it's a really good little community school, and you feel the love when people really support you, even if it's not their preferred genre. Like a lot of folks I know don't really like fantasy all that much, but they still bought it because they know that I wrote it, and they were like, oh, you want to support Roberti. and it was just a very it was very touching.
Okay. Yes, indeed. Uh, okay. Next question. This one is actually kind of similar to a previous one, or I think the answer would be similar. Has working on the release of your debut taught you anything you want to do differently with your next releases? We already mentioned that somewhat when it comes to publishing, what you would want to do differently in the pre-publishing phase. Would you say you've gathered any lessons as to how to I don't know, format the book, or
Oh
how to
yeah.
schedule your time, or something like that?
Yeah, I think the formatting thing, I think I would have there's always at least one more read through you can do. And I've talked to a little bit to editors, and like I would even maybe say that I think next time I might even try to see if I can get the audiobook to release simultaneously. I've got the beginnings of the process to get traders made into an audiobook, and a lot of people have asked me about the audiobook, and I think that a lot of people who are not stronger readers or just don't like reading, which to me as a teacher and a writer is very unfortunate. I think that would be something. I think building anticipation. I want to say too, when I released traders, I only had like 300 followers on Twitter, and like no web presence. I think that building that up is pretty key as well. And I think as well, like maybe I should have written short stories first, put out those writing samples so people could see if they like how I write, and then released the book. But there's a lot of different things I think I'm going to do next time. I'm hoping I've written about 50,000 words on the rough draft of A Grave for Us All, and I feel like I could maybe get the rough draft done by the end of the year, and maybe release the book summer of next year, specifically because I usually have a lot of free time during the summer. So that would be my goal, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Uh, we're almost done here. Just a
Okay.
just a couple of questions. Just a couple of questions left. Uh, Namely, of the questions I have asked of you over the course of this interview, is there any you would want me to answer?
Hmm. I would say the thing I think that well, I guess it's the question that I answered incorrectly the first time. But like what is your favorite? I would say like what is your favorite part of the writing process? What is your least favorite part of the writing process? I think that's always cool to see from different authors.
There is no correct and incorrect way. There is only the intended and unintended.
True. Good point.
Yeah. Uh, let's see. I think my favorite parts, or the parts that I think work best and most fluently for me, are as you said, the dialogue and action scenes, because it really allows me to delve somewhat into into the minds of my characters, and figure out, you know what is it that they think like. How is it that they how is it that they make decisions, and uh, how do they use what is what is at their disposal in order to reach what kind of any kind of effect they desire. And that is very thrilling, at least to me.
Yeah.
That is and
Absolutely.
that is something I enjoy reading, and it is also something I enjoy writing. My my biggest problem is description, to a but it's not that big a problem. It's more of a nuisance than a problem, to be honest,
Yes.
because I'm I'm kind of struggling with how much is too much. Like,
Yeah.
do you need to describe, when it comes to describing a person? Do you need to just say they have bushy eyebrows, or do you need to give the exact length? And
I
you know,
feel that.
and in general, you kind of want to give uh, enough. You're gonna have to give some specificity, so people have at least the similar broad strokes. But if you make it too specific, you're making the reading experience a little too difficult for your for
Right.
your audience. So you have to allow some blanks for them to fill in. But as you're writing, it's not immediately obvious which blanks
Right.
are best left empty. So yeah, that's my general struggle.
That makes sense. I was listening to, speaking of like my drive to my 2 hour drive, I've been listening to Wheel of Time, Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. And I'm listening to his description and I'm just like, he is very specific. I wish I could do, maybe, I mean, I don't know if that's my style. It might be a little of a style choice, but it's impressive how much you can describe what some clothes look like.
Yeah. I'm a bit lucky in that sense because my mom works in the fashion industry, so I have
Mm,
so I have some pretty good
cool.
ideas about how clothes flow. I'm not you know I'm not a professional in any kind of sense, but I kind of know. Oh yeah, there's breast pockets, there's no breast pocket. Shoulders can look certain ways, or you can have buttons that work in one particular way, or stuff like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
And if I have any further questions, I can always ask her.
It's always good to have experts.
Yeah. Uh, I think that was almost it.
Okay.
In closing, you already mentioned that you have a website. Is there any other link or platform that you would want to plug or advertise before we close out?
Sure. On Twitter, I'm at Mike S. Roberti. My last name for any of my stuff is spelled Roberti. My website, once again, www.michaelroberti.com. And I'm going to try to get back into this. I actually had a Instagram where I made Dungeons and Dragons rules for my fantasy setting, and that's at Inheritance of Dust and Ash on Instagram. And so there's rules like if you read my book and like it and wanted to kind of play around in that world, there's rules for the different variants on human. There's some of the artifacts, one of which is extremely spoilery for these books, but it will, it will come to light in this book. It's the ending of this book is gonna be something else, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, I can pull it off.
Okay. All this talk about about how you use some parts of your story reminded me of City of Bridges.
Hmm.
Not sure. I'm pretty sure you haven't heard about it.
I'm not sure if I have the title sounds familiar, but I don't like it. Doesn't immediately bring anything to mind.
Maybe you've seen it in maybe you've seen it in one of my tweets because I've talked about it. I've
Okay.
mentioned it on Twitter. It's a fantasy book by an Australian author. I reviewed it last year, and I'll remember, I'll put the I'll put a link in the iCard above right now.
Mhm.
It's pretty similar to. I think it's but and some of the things we've talked about strike some similar chords because it is based on a it's based kind of a fantasy tabletop role playing game
Mhm.
that that the author and his friends developed because they were displeased with the usual selection,
Yeah.
and he then developed a story to go along with that with that game and with those rules. And City of Bridges in particular is kind of a MacGuffin plot where the main character encounters a MacGuffin and needs to uh, bring it somewhere safe,
Mhm.
and gets pursued by uh, some enemies
Mm.
over the course of this adventure. So might be something you find interesting.
It does sound interesting. It sounds like something I'd like to read. To be honest, I'll have to check it out.
Okay. Well, as I said, I'll put a link up when when this interview goes out.
Sure.
The review will also have also have a link in the description where you'll find a book. But you can search through Twitter. He is at you can find him under at Sir uh, underscore Andre underscore Jones if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, the book once again is called City of Bridges. In case you're curious,
Okay.
it's the first of a larger series. I think a trilogy so far that is planned.
Mhm.
So if you like the first one, you might like the ones that will come next.
For sure.
Okay, and uh, I'll say that was it. Thank you for your time,
Thank you.
and thank you to everyone who has been paying attention. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please leave a like and maybe even share this video wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add to anything we mentioned, the comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. Ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My own book, Heir to the Emperor Next Generation, is available at most major book retailers under a master link in the description down below, right past my social media and Mike's links, which I suggest you check out should you feel so inclined. Until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor. I've been with Mike Roberti, and this has been the Heir's Lair.